And we are live. So, how you doing today, Cory?
Doing pretty good, man. Can't complain. A little bit cold outside, but other than that, I think it's good. I think the excitement is continuing to build as the week goes on.
Did you guys get much snow there in your neck of the woods?
6 inches or so. It wasn't too terrible.
We we
It wasn't blown out as much as people thought it was going to be.
we had a half an inch of ice, and then on top of that half an inch of ice, the weather dumped about 12 inches. I guess the official count is 13 inches of snow. So that's the most that we've had since like the 60s. So, um, well, I'm Dylan. My partner over here. We don't have a video for him today, but this is Cory.
Hi.
We don't actually hate the Broncos, but it's a love hate relationship.
Sometimes.
Yeah, this year's been a lot less hate than previous years. So uh, we're
Yeah,
actually here to
I'm
discuss playoff football. I mean, how crazy is that, right?
9 years in the making, this was. And let me tell you, it's been a very long 9 years.
It has. We've had some really crappy quarterback play, and I mean we've endured Russell Wilson, Joe Flacco, Teddy Bridgewater. I mean,
Kendall
you're
Hinton.
yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah, that was pretty bad. That was probably the low point, I'd say.
Oh, and you can't forget Buzz Lightyear, Drew Lock either. I mean, we had to suffer through a lot of that.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess what is your feeling going into this game? Are you excited, nervous? Where are you at on this?
Well, I'm excited. Watching your team make the playoffs for the first time in nearly a decade is always something really cool to experience. I'm not nervous at all because, as you and I will both touch on, the Broncos weren't even supposed to be here. So it's kind of in a sense we're kind of playing with house money. So whatever happens, as long as they don't get blown out, I think I'm okay with everything. And like I was saying earlier, just every single day I wake up and I'm like, oh, it's one more day closer to Sunday. And it's been a long time since I felt that way.
Right, I feel you there. I mean, and like you mentioned, we weren't supposed to be here. I think the overall prediction was that we could expect about 5 wins this year, and we doubled that win total. So that was the first exciting thing. But then to actually get back to the playoffs, I mean it. I've been pretty hard on them the last couple of weeks because I really wanted to see us go in strong. I wanted to see us win the last 2 weeks, and then I expected we'd probably blow the crap out of the Chiefs because we almost beat them in the regular season with the starters. So I mean, you would think that we would be able to beat their backups pretty handily, which we did, of course. And of course, it's brought everybody trying to whine and complain that the Chiefs gave up on or just rolled over on us. But I think they're going to end up regretting that potentially. But
Especially, I mean, because we match up, and we're going to talk about this later on, but we match up really well against the Bills. I think they probably made a mistake.
uh,
But I also I that's one thing I disliked about the end of the season, and I was pretty hard on them too. But everybody was saying that it was a sure loss for the Broncos if the Chiefs had played their starters, and they're just completely discounting the first game that we had against the Chiefs where we lost on a fluke field goal block rather. I think we probably win that game even if Kansas City plays their starters, and I know maybe that's just the optimist in me, but I truly feel that way.
right. Well, and I feel the same as well. Like I think we were gonna win that game no matter what because we barely lost to them in Arrowhead, and I'm sorry we don't play we play better at home than we do at the away. So I think we had a good shot at beating them, but it is what it is. You can only play the teams that are put in front of you, um, and the team that was in front of us this week was the Chiefs minus most of their starters, and we did what we were supposed to do.
Which I
And
think is kind of funny because I think both of us at the beginning of the season predicted if we made the playoffs, it would come down to beating the Chiefs the last game of the year.
I
We just
think,
didn't know it would be under those circumstances.
yeah, I think we both did say something like that. But I thought we'd be maybe fighting them for a division. I didn't figure that they would be like the absolute worst 15-1 or 15-2 now team of all time. Um, but here's the thing with the Chiefs. they can play like crap in the regular season, and then when the playoffs come around, they're a whole different monster. And that's why they're back-to-back champions, and hopefully we can do something to stop that this time around.
Well, see, the same thing can be said for the Broncos too. We've talked about this at length. The playoffs are a whole different animal, and once you get in, anything can happen.
Right. Well,
So, what do you think the difference was? Like, how did we get here?
well, I think the biggest thing is we had a lot more consistency from the quarterback position. Bo Nix has had one of the best rookie seasons I've seen in a long time, and I know people do everything in their power to bend over backwards to discount how good he was this year. But I mean, he was what, the second highest touchdowns of a rookie quarterback of all time.
Right.
Everybody wants to talk about how good Josh Allen is, and admittedly, he's incredible. Like I think John Elway made a huge mistake in not drafting him. However, statistically, if you put Josh Allen and Bo Nix side by side, they're virtually identical. The only difference is Bo Nix did have about twice the interceptions, which, I mean, he's a rookie. Of course that's going to happen.
Right. Yeah, he also went up, to start the season with his development and everything else like that. He started against some pretty strong defensive teams, and it wasn't very ideal for a rookie quarterback. I mean, going on the road at Seattle, then playing Pittsburgh, like it just wasn't a good start.
Right.
But like you said, he more than made up from it and came roaring back, and now here we are.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's been pretty incredible so far. We were a lot better in a lot of areas than I anticipated that we would be. I would have never believed this defense would be as good as it is. I mean, just crazy good. And admittedly, we've had some struggles in the back half, and that's kind of why we've lost some of the games we've lost, is because the defense has had some injuries and has kind of. I think my biggest gripe and complaint with this defense is that Vance Joseph does not make adjustments well. We had multiple different games where people were just tearing us up, and there were plenty of adjustments that could have been made to fix that. But we just stuck in the same thing and stubbornly tried to make it work.
Well, and I think one of the big reasons for that, and we talked about this, is the addition of Jim Leonard as the defensive backs coach. I think we got roughly with the same amount of talent, because Pat Surtain was here last year too, but with roughly the same talent level, we got a lot more out of the back end than we saw last year. And I think that once you can do that and play some really good man coverage like the Broncos have been doing, it really opens up your front four for rushing the passer. And I think that that's really been the big difference.
Well, and we have had some improvements in that front as well. I mean, adding my brain is. I'm having a brain fart. The guy we added from the Jets that we traded for. Myers Franklin, or is that right?
Sorry, I just didn't want to interrupt you. Yep.
Yeah, he has been fantastic, and then Zach Allen. Yeah, man, I'm having brain farts left and right, but
it's okay. It's probably been a long day.
Zach Allen has been pretty crazy as well, and yes,
huge Pro Bowl snub. Huge Pro Bowl snub for Zach Allen.
Definitely is. Yes, yeah. For those who are having to suffer through my stuttering, sorry. I've been up since 6 o'clock this morning. We had to drive to Wichita, Kansas, about an hour and a half away because my son is needing a procedure on his tongue that's tied. So, anyways,
fun stuff.
What differences do you think we've got on between last year and this year?
Well, I already mentioned the back end, the defensive backs coach, freeing up a lot of those edge rushers. And how about the coming on of Nick Bonito? Like that, I mean, he was good last year, but he just came out of nowhere this year. Nobody expected him to have the numbers he had. And honestly, he doesn't even look like the same player that he was last year. I don't know. I don't know if he got some additional coaching or watched some extra film or what, or ate his Wheaties, but
I don't know. I maybe he spent his off season hanging out with Von Miller. I don't know. He's looking like a little mini Von Miller. Everybody wants to call him Casa Benito. I call him Nito Benito.
I think another thing too is just the culture shift around the Denver Broncos. They got a lot of the bad meat, so to speak, out of the locker room, and I think that this team, more so than I've seen in quite a long time, is actually coming together and playing as a team. They play for each other and they have each other's back, and that's just something we simply didn't see last year.
Right. Well, let's talk about this game this week. A lot of people are obviously already saying we don't stand a chance, that it's going to be a blowout. But people have been saying those kinds of things about us all year, except for the ever faithful Adam Rank, who says that we're going to win this game.
We love you, Adam.
We do. We love Adam. He, We've come a long way, because I remember several years back that he predicted we were going to win 4 games, and I think he might have actually ended up being right, close to it. But I remember him and Perna having some beef over that. He's come a long way from hating us to all of a sudden like he's one of our biggest supporters. So definitely love Rank. But as to the whole thought process that we don't stand a chance that we're going to get blown out, this team's really not that different than the team last year, and I don't think the Bills are hugely different than they were last year. Last year, we did go into Buffalo with Russell Wilson as our quarterback and win the game. Now, granted, most of that was on our defense, like Russ is Russ. But I think that we've actually gotten better on defense since then. And I think defensively, we really match up pretty well with Buffalo, at least on paper.
I think Buffalo's offensively worse than they were last year. I mean, they traded for Amari Cooper, and he might not even play in this game, from what we're being told. But as far as that goes, they really don't have any other standout wide receiver threats. So I would say that arguably Buffalo's a worse offensive team than they were last year, which is really odd considering their schedule seemed to be a little bit easier for them this year. So
right. Well, and as far as us matching up, like I said earlier, when you compare our passing game to their passing game, it's virtually identical. I mean, it's like maybe 100 yards difference, and we've got some more interceptions. Rushing, they are a little bit better running the ball than we are. So we definitely will have to watch out for that. But then defensively, again, our defensive passing ranking and their defensive passive ranking, they're pretty neck and neck. I mean, we are pretty much in the same ballpark from them. However, we've got a significantly better rushing defense. I think they're going to have to beat us on the ground. And I think that's going to be kind of my key, is that on the ground, our rushing defense is better. And I think that that's going to play into our favor. But I think looking at statistically, on paper, we match up very well with them.
And James Cook had a really, really, really hot December. He had, 2 100-yard games in there. 1,000-yard rusher on the year, almost 5 yards carry. You can't forget James Cook had 16 touchdowns this year.
Right.
So, I mean, he is a dangerous back, but like you said, I think we match up well up front with them to kind of stymie that. Fell off a little bit of a cliff the last couple of games here, only averaging about 3 yards a carry and 2 touchdowns over the last 2 games. But it doesn't really seem as though that's what the Bills really lean on. I think what they're going to lean on is Josh Allen and his passing.
Right, and I think I think defensively we can give him fits in that, especially since, like you said, they really don't have much for wide receiver. And so if Vance Joseph sticks to our brand of football, which is get after the quarterback and play a lot of man defense, I think if you've got Surtain's shadowing whoever their main receiver is, they're not going to have a lot of options, and I think we'll do a pretty good job of containing Allen in that.
Yeah, the biggest thing is they got to keep him in the pocket. Like you said, getting after him, rushing off the ends, everything else like that. When you allow him to go out there and start improvising, that's when Josh Allen really starts to hurt you.
Agreed. Yeah, we're going to definitely have somebody spying on him. We're going to have to have at least one of our linebackers watching him at all times because of the fact that he has a habit of breaking contain and biting you really hard doing that. So I agree.
And he's cooled off the last couple of games too. He only had 154 yards against the Patriots before Christmas, and then on the 29th, the Jets, he only had 182 yards, and the Jets are not a good defense. Of course, they were up really big in that game. So, I mean, that could be why he didn't maybe push the ball down the field as much as he normally does. But I mean, it's hopeful, and it looks like these teams like that are kind of like the Broncos that have good defensive pressure up front tend to stymie him a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, the thing that we saw last year when we got after him, I went back and kind of rewatched some of that game, and when we were getting after him, like he makes mistakes when he's pressured. He's not great when he gets pressured. However, their offensive line is very good, and so he does not get pressured very often. And when he does, like we discussed a minute ago, he has a tendency of just tucking the ball and running and gashing you for a large amount of yards. And so,
yeah, he's one of those guys that can just pull the ball down and just get 2 or 3 yards and get down. He's only been sacked 14 times on the season,
right?
Which, I mean, if you've watched Josh Allen in previous years, I mean, that's a pretty low number for him.
Right.
He tended to get hit a lot, but now he's not just running the ball to be crazy. He's learning his spots. He's learning when to just get a couple of yards and get out of harm's way.
I think personally, he is the one that I would compare the most to Elway, since Elway, like he's kind of the modern day equivalent, I would say, of John Elway, and I've got a lot of respect for him, but I definitely want to see him do very poorly this week.
Yep. How do you think Bo Nix is going to fare against this Bills defense, this vaunted Bills defense?
They've got a tough defense. Like I said, as far as their passing defense, it's on par with ours. And we've got one of the better passing defenses in the league. And so Nix is going to have his work cut out for him. I really hope we've seen McLaughlin the last couple weeks, averaging 4, 5, 6 yards a carry at points. I think that we're going to have to see him get some heavy action. I'm not sure what we're gonna see from Nix this week. He has a tendency of, when we're up against a really strong defense, kind of struggling a little bit. So that is kind of a concern of mine.
They ranked 24th in the league in passing touchdowns. I think this has to be the game. I mean, if you're just going to put all the marbles on the table, right? This has to be the game that Sean Payton has to unleash Bo Nix, so to speak.
Well, and one of the things that I wanted to talk about that excited me in this game, speaking of Nix in the passing game and things that need to be unleashed, Marvin Mims. Like, if he is really stepped up over the last couple of weeks. Beforehand, I was kind of looking and checking his stats, and over the last 5 weeks, he has had 341 yards and 5 touchdowns. So the vast majority of his production on the year has come in the last 5 weeks. So Peyton's kind of figured something out with him, and I think he's going to have to be a big part of whether we win this game or not. He's got a lot of speed, and he's really hard to account for. He can be like a little Tyreek Hill type guy, minus the, girlfriend and child beating. He's gonna have to step up even more this week, I think, for us to have a really good game.
Well, in the last 8 games, Marvin Mims has only had 3 games where he didn't catch 100% of his targets. You know how insane that is? That's the guy's catching the ball. The catch in the back of the end zone to extend the game against the Bengals
was incredible.
Especially for a guy his size, because he's not that big. It was a little Eddie Royal-esque to me, if we're gonna go way back in Broncos lore. But
right.
You're right. He's I don't know if they use the phrase. I think Sean Payton calls them jokers. Kind of the same way he used Reggie Bush, kind of the same way he used Alvin Kamara. And I know he's not a running back, but it seems like Sean Payton figured that out with him to just find some way to manufacture touches for this guy.
Right. I mean, you got to get some. When you've got somebody that's that fast, that explosive, that elusive, you kind of just got to figure out whatever way you can to get him involved. And Peyton has been doing that over the last couple of weeks. So it's definitely something that's made me happy to see.
And, not just his receiving and rushing ability, but I think he also adds a really huge element in the return game as well.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't really talked much about special teams, but I mean, that could end up being the deciding factor of this game.
It could. We got a pretty good kicker, you know?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think he's the best kicker in the NFL right now. Maybe that's just my homerism speaking, but
Statistically, he's one of the top 10 of all time, I believe. So I don't think you're very homeristic. He is historically accurate. He's had a few fluky things happen, like the block kick that we had in Kansas City, but historically, he's been really, really accurate.
I'm trying to figure out, I had this written down. He's had 2 games where he's missed kicks all year long. One was in the monsoon with the Jets, and then that blocked kick in Kansas City.
Right.
Um,
He had one other that he missed earlier in the game, but I mean, it was like a stupidly long, like almost going for the record type kick.
right. What
So
was that? Yeah, it was
I
40
want to
to
say it was like
49.
60 something. It was really
Oh,
long.
50 plus, yeah.
Yeah, it was longer than he normally hits, and it's kind of unrealistic to expect a guy that really doesn't have a long leg, no matter how accurate he is. You can't expect a guy that doesn't have that kind of leg to make that shot. They were just kind of just doing a hope and a prayer before halftime. Let's see if we can make this, and no, we can't.
I think we will see a lot of Lutz. I don't, as much as I want Sean Payton to kind of unleash the offense, I think that they learned a lesson playing at Baltimore, being careless with the football and careless with the decision making. When
Mm-hmm.
you got points in a playoff game, you got to take them.
Well, one thing that I will say is if it comes down to us scoring a touchdown at the last minute to tie it up, we sure as heck better go for two.
I mean, why wouldn't you, right? I mean, at that point, like we already talked about, you're kind of playing with house money. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I mean, don't leave it to chance like you did that Cincinnati game.
Right.
A lot of people disagree with me, but I firmly believe that at the end of that Cincinnati game, the Broncos should have went for 2 and tried to put the game away.
No, I absolutely agree. I think this whole playing for the time mentality that he had during the Bengals game is 100% why we lost. I think we could have won that game, and then that would have shut everything up. All this talk that we've had to listen to for the last week of, oh, the Chiefs shouldn't be, or the Broncos shouldn't be in there, it should be the Bengals. Well, we won more games than the Bengals. You can debate whether that was fair or whether it was the way it should have been, but bottom line, you want to make the playoffs, win games when it matters, and don't count
No.
on somebody else to lose to make you a playoff team.
And that what we're talking about right now kind of brings me to my criticisms a little bit, and what does kind of scare me about this
Mm-hmm.
game is the fact that in some of these close games, Sean Payton's his game direction and game flow and the way he manages games has gotten a little wonky.
Right.
Um, if you've listened to us on X during our live broadcasts, I've gotten pretty animated about Sean Payton's decision making near
Yes.
the end of games and close games. So hopefully, I think what he's doing though, I think he's just outsmarting himself. And he's a great coach. He's a smart coach. He's a culture changer. He's gotten these guys to play for one another, but he's just got to quit outsmarting himself. For instance, everybody saw the, run it on the back of his play card, and then they were averaging almost 7 yards a carry in
When
the
they
first
stopped
half,
running
and
it.
they stopped running the ball, and it's like, Sean Payton, why did you do that? Like, so
I
that
think
comes
that's
down to
the real
second half
reason he was so
adjustments.
angry about him showing that, because he knew as well as we did that he should have kept doing it, and he just didn't, because that's something Peyton has historically had a problem with, is not committing to a run game even when it's working.
Right. And the second half adjustments, I mean, I won't say that it's been bad the last 6 games of the year for Vance Joseph, but they've left something to be desired a couple of different games.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope he stays out of his own way as well too, and lets his guys go play. He needs to do what's working and stay with it. I mean, and if things are going bad for him, he needs to learn how to make adjustments on the fly, because we've seen situations even this season where he's came out in the second half and stopped doing what was working, and then the game just kind of got away from him.
Well, my advice for Vance Joseph at this point is keep doing what you did to get here. Like, if you lose, we weren't expected to be here anyways. That's what everybody's anticipating for us to do, is lose. So stick to what you know works, what got you where you are right now, and don't try and get cute with it, and don't try and play scared and move into zone. Stick with your man coverage. Maybe you don't need to blitz as much as you normally do, because we've discussed already how bad Allen can beat you. But stick to the man defense. Like, when we are running in man, we are a very good team. We get a lot of coverage sacks. We make things happen. But if
Yep,
we
and
if we get
when we
scared
go
and
into
put it in
zone, yeah,
zone, it falls apart
that's when
drastically.
that's when things get real bad for us. That
Right.
huge run that Joe Burrow had to extend their drive was zone coverage defense. You know, a lot of the big runs and the big passes over the middle to extend drives for other teams we've seen where the Broncos getting cute and trying to play a zone defense. And, you know, I don't get me wrong, I love Cody Barton as much as the next guy, but you don't want him
In
in
zone.
zone cover.
No, he is terrible in zone. And we really, as a whole on defense, are not a good zone team. Like, we need to be in man most of the game.
I mean, that's kind of how the defense was built. With the back end that you have with Pat Surtain and McMillan playing great, the emergence of Riley Moss, let those guys cover their guys and do it like you said, do what got you there.
Right.
Dance with who brought you.
Right. So I'm going to make my hot take of the game. You can make whatever hot take you would like, but my hot take is I think this is the week we finally get a 100-yard rusher. Um, I think it's going to be Bo Nix, but who would you say, if we have that happen, that you think it might be?
You know, Javante came out and said that zero carry game he had a couple of games ago, like, personally hurt him, and I think that's why we saw the angry Javante again against Chiefs. Now, granted, it was against backups, but I mean, I think we're going to see Javante Williams come into the playoffs with a chip on his shoulder, and I think if Sean Payton keeps feeding him the ball and letting him get into a rhythm, I think he could do some dangerous stuff. Now, if they just keep swapping in running backs like, eating Skittles or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
then I think you're right. It will be Bo Nix, the 100-yard rusher. But I think Javante could be really dangerous this week, especially late in the season. He's well rested. He's been platooned out, with several other different running backs. He's got, I wouldn't say fresh legs, but, as compared to a lot of other people, I mean, he's about as fresh as they come right now.
Well, I kind of remember a team within the last 10 years for Denver that got into the playoffs, which obviously we know which team I'm talking about, because hadn't been any of those in about 9 years. But we were carried on the shoulders of an aging C.J. Anderson, who played pretty good in the playoffs, and Von Miller, that was an absolute beast. And it'd be kind of cool to see a Williams, a Benito led team for this through the playoffs, and see if we could kind of duplicate some of that 2015 energy.
Yep. And beyond that, I mean, if I had to guess another person, I think we're going to see, if Javante doesn't get the bulk of the carries, I think we're going to see Estime a lot in the game. It all depends on where the game goes and what the score is and situational and everything else like that. But I'm, I, I think you would probably agree that the best chance the Broncos have of winning this game is to keep the ball out of Josh Allen's hands.
I do agree with that, yes. And another back that you may not be thinking about, because we haven't seen him all year, there's a good possibility we might get Tyler Beatty back, or Bidet,
That
or
would be.
however you pronounce it.
He says it's pronounced bidet, but so we'll go with that. Yeah. I mean, I would like he did some great things before his injury. I'm a little worried about how sharp he may be, so to speak.
Sure.
But yeah, it would be awesome to see him. Hopefully, he is active. I mean, he did a lot for this team before the injury. He definitely deserves an opportunity. I mean, you only got one football though. You know what I'm saying? Like, eventually, you got to find the hot hand and stick with it.
Well, if you'd had to make a hot take for this game, what would you roll with?
I my hot take for this game is going to be that Bo Nix becomes a household name. Everybody's already talking about him, about his great rookie season and everything else like that. I, as we talked about earlier, I think that he's going to get unleashed by Sean Payton. We're going to see some deep balls down the field. Um, it, I'm talking, potentially 250 to 300 yards passing this game, probably a few touchdowns. Um, if I had to give like one thing that probably hot take sure to not happen, I guess they call them, that would be mine.
All right. Well, I guess to kind of wrap this up, let's get some score predictions. Where do you think we're at?
This hurts because I don't want to say it. My heart and my head are in two different places. My heart says 27-24 Broncos. My head says 31-17 Buffalo.
Now, I think we're going to come out of it 27-20 Broncos. That's my score prediction there. But I agree. I could if things don't go right, it's going to be ugly. We are either going to play a super close game and potentially win, or they are just going to beat the brakes off of us, and it's hard to say which way that's going to go.
The last time I got amped up and thought, and thought with my heart about, how well a team was going to do, I mean, it just kind of all came crashing down. So
Yeah,
I am trying to steal my reserves, so to
the
speak,
the
and
one
not expect. What's up?
the one thing that I would say is the one thing that we've seen this year. This isn't the Broncos we've seen over the last decade. There have been a lot of games that we get behind early, and we come back and we win. Broncos teams of the past, if there's any adversity, we're just done. We had a loser mentality. This team is not they're not stuck in loser mode. They've got a winning culture, a winning mindset. Um, so I don't think it's fair to compare this team to anything that's happened in the past with Broncos. Um, because this is not the same team of even a year ago, much less over the last decade.
I would 100% agree with that. The culture is entirely different.
Yeah, there's
And
a
thanks Sean Payton for pointing that out in every press conference, lightly throwing shade at Russell Wilson every chance he gets.
man. I laugh every time he throws shade. I mean, it's amazing. I there's a lot of players that people were freaking out when we got rid of them. Judy would be one of them, but I think it's really Sean Payton came in here and cleaned house. He got rid of the players that didn't meet the culture mindset that he wanted to see, and he changed this locker room. You know what really sticks out to me is last year watching Garrett Bowles in the locker room after maybe it was the Miami game, but we had gotten beaten and he was just distraught, and he's like, man, this sucks. Like all I've ever done my entire career is lose. Um,
You know, there's another sports team in Denver, and not that this is going to happen, but the year after Nathan McKinnon told the locker room reporters, I'm in my 8th year and I haven't won shit. He was tired of losing, and we kind of got that same thing from Garrett Bowles, so maybe we'll get the same outcome.
I hope so. I mean, I really think no matter whether we win or lose this weekend, this team has turned a corner, and I think that we are going to be a very dangerous team for at least the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, we're doing all this with the dead cap hit. We're doing all
Right.
this with talent depleted roster. I mean, watch out.
Wait till we get some cap space to start signing people. Like we have one of the least talented rosters in the league, according to pretty much every pundit everywhere. And yet here we are getting ready to play a playoff game for the first time in 9 years.
Yep, and I'll be there, buddy. You'll be there. We'll be on X Spaces live as we always are.
I will probably be
Screaming
a
our full
little
heads.
late. Game is the early game. It starts at 12, and so I will be at church until about 12:15, 12:30. So I may miss the first half, but yes, we definitely will be live, um, and get that discussion going.
Well, it's been fun talking Broncos with you, man. I'm glad that you say the Broncos win. I want to say they win. Like I said, I kind of him. You know what? To end this specifically, I'll go ahead and I'll give a real score: 1916 Broncos. That's what I'm going to go with.
I don't think there's any way we hold the Bills to under 20, but we'll see.
Yeah.
All right,
Well,
man.
all right, man.
Good talking with you. Thanks to
Yep,
everybody
you
that
as well.
watched today, and let's go Broncos.
Go Broncos.